because the minority own huge gardens full of food, which they're too rich to need to go and harvest, or they're too old, or they're too this, or too that. And I know I'm stating the obvious to a lot of people here, but just for the few who might be ignorant of it, there are lots of groups in London getting together to learn more about foraging and to get together to harvest unwanted food. And there is so much there. But rather than studying for 10 years, you know, just on your own and botany and stuff, it is easier to get together with other people and, like, you know, to give a plug for my group. I'm part of a group called Urban Harvest in North London, and we have a monthly walk or activity or celebration where we say, hey, did you know this was edible, and look what nice things you can make of it, or we have a potluck party or just something like that, but it's kind of meant to be educational and fun. And we also, last year, we got together and leafleted and picked apples in one local street. We did 2 pickings. We had so many apples, we were almost in despair of how to get rid of them. We hadn't even, you know, brushed the surface of the amount of surplus fruit that a few people have. Now, these people aren't going to open up their doors to everyone, and they're not going to, you know, give up their gardens because they are not going to suddenly realise they're overprivileged and they should give it away. But what they will respond to is a polite request for a group of people to go in, and that's what we did. And that's actually really easy to do, and lots of groups are doing it in London.
What's the project called? Urban Harvest?
Ours is, we're urbanharvest.org.uk. There's lots of abundance type groups and stuff around.
Sure.
There's also transition towns doing this kind of thing.
What are they called? Urban Harvest?
Our group is,
yeah.
Right, we've got a website, urbanharvest.org.uk. But I just wanted to make a plug for the fact that there are so many surplus resources in a city that sometimes it's easier to sort of surf on the surplus here than it is in the country. And one of my reasons for not living in the country is I'm frightened of being stuck somewhere where I might be dependent on petrol or to get around or things like that.
Do you have a question?
No, sorry.
No, just a comment. Okay, just checking. That's cool. Thank you. Phoenix, you were next.
Brilliant. I think what you're doing is amazing. And living in squatting communities for years, we share resources a lot more and help each other. It really is some of the last bits I heard. I've only heard the last bits of it, but about land usage. You know, 1% of the population, only 70% of the land. We really need some land redistribution so that people can forage, can grow their own food, and live more in harmony with the environment. One thing came up with this lady was speaking. There's something called landshare.org. People who do have a lot of land, sometimes up for, if you check the website, sharing more land. We need some redistribution, we need some sharing of land resources. One thing I'd just like to share with everyone is in Forest of Dean, they just squatted an eco-education centre that closed due to cuts. It's just opened up, they need help. They're hoping to reopen up where people can learn about growing food, planting trees, that kind of thing. But we really need to see some situation. You can live self-sufficiently without money if you have land and space to do it, where you can grow your own food, you can build your own shelter, and rather than us being given 50 quid a week is what we used to call the dole for the land that's been stolen off us, we actually need some of that land redistributed so that people can grow their own food, make their own homes and live sustainably. And massive admiration for what you've done, and let's hope we all move towards a more sustainable future where we can share land.
I couldn't agree more. Land reform's key.
Going back down there, did you have a question? And then you're next.
Yeah. You talked about that money perpetuates the system. How do you personally, and this is kind of to Nick as well, view the free man movement? Because I see it's not just money that perpetuates that system and the enslavement, it's also the legislation that we're bound in. As you said earlier, Nick, that we need to have land, but we can't do it because of the Land Act. So how do you both view the Freeman movement in its opposition by using the legislation and its legalese against itself to be able to oppose that and to say no to it?
Yeah, to be honest, I think the free man of the land, I know John Harris just talks on freeman of the land, and I remember being at some that were 4 hours long, and I think it's a very, I wouldn't like to comment too much on it because it needs a lot of depth to understand where it's come out of and what it's really about. Like my own take on it, to be honest, is that it's such there's such a language that goes with it. There's such an understanding you need to have of that whole thing.
Yeah, but when you're kind of held in that and you kind of stop, for you it's kind of, you just walked away. You walked away and gone, right, I'm going to live moneyless. And you've done that, and I'm good to you for doing that. But a lot of us are tied in with stuff. We've got families, and how do we extract ourselves from being sucked by the machine constantly?
Yeah, it's a very difficult, and without, you know, this is part of why I said at the start, so you may have a better answer, but it's why I said, when I said at the start I don't have the answers to every scenario. I really mean it. It's like it's become so complex now. Every single person in this room has a different scenario. Like you've got a few kids maybe and a family. Somebody else will have a different scenario, and because it's been so mixed up over such a long time now, it's hard to unravel that. So to be really frankly honest, for your situation, I don't know.
Well, my situation's good. I'm using it, so
yeah,
it's working for me.
All right.
But I just meant as a whole, it's like the Occupy movement is standing up and saying, you know, we've had enough of this. But that's fine. You can stand up and say that and hold your placards for as long as you want, and the big machine will just keep ploughing over the top of you and fucking you over. So the only way we can ever extract ourselves from that system is to actually stand up and say, do you know what? I don't owe you any money. And it kind of then goes with what you're saying with the money thing. It's like money is valueless. It's fiat currency. So why can't we just stand up and say that to them?
I guess what you can say that, or I could probably say, because I don't feel qualified enough to talk about free man of the land stuff. I don't even know if John Harris feels qualified sometimes when you hear him speak. He's very honest about his own understanding of it. I would just say that if anybody here is interested in, what's your name, sorry? Phil. Whatever Phil's saying is to go and check out, just Google free man of the land, and what's the website called? The people's
TPUC.
People's, you know, the
TPUC.org.
TPUC.org. If you want to find out ways that maybe the free man of the land stuff can help you to reduce your interaction with the kind of monetary system that you've probably come here to find out about. I just don't feel qualified enough to really go into depth on that subject, because I would be afraid of saying the wrong thing that could lead somebody down a path that's not helpful to them.
I also ask you.
Sorry, Phil, excuse me. I know you'd love to have a conversation, but there's a room full of people with questions. So if we could move on with the questions so that everybody gets to know.
Can I just also add a bit of an answer to that? So this issue of the land is very important. It's absolutely vital. As I said earlier, in a society where most people cannot afford to rent or buy a home without spending like 80% of their disposable income just on rent, what is going on and what can we do about it? So the historical perspective is this. In the 1920s and 30s and 40s, when the countryside was still reasonably heavily populated, hadn't been emptied out as it is now, urbanisation, though, was happening and was in full tilt. And the cities were growing very fast, and they were the major conurbations that they still are today. But at that time, there was no Town and Country Planning Act. And there was a huge move at that time for people who lived in cities to get themselves a little plot in the countryside with a hut on it. And it was called plot lands, and they were all over the southeast, but everywhere else, you know, around conurbations as well. People were able to go out, club together or on their own, buy a strip of land and get themselves a little Englishman's castle, as it was thought of at the time. And the ruling class, by which I mean the landed class and Parliament, looked on this with horror and decided something had to be done about it. And in 1947, which was of course the time when the welfare state was being set up, and it was a time when, to everybody's amazement, Churchill, who won the war, was kicked out, Labour came in. But at that time, that is when the Town and Country Planning Act was brought in to stop people just being able to get themselves a little bit of land to live on or grow food on. That's what it dates back to. So right now, that is the law that needs to be looked at and overturned or got around in some way if we are to be able to become self-sufficient and to become independent of the state, at least on that little level of being able to grow food and live independently. But I don't think that now is the right time, much as I would like to say that's what the battle should be today. I think what the Occupy movement has shown is that there's an incredibly deep anger about the financial system. And I think you've got to pick your battles, and right now I think the battle is about the financial system. We're about to see the collapse of the euro, the partial collapse of the euro, we're going to see a string of banks going down in Europe. And I think we should keep focused on the financial system. And that is what Occupy Wall Street was first focused on. That's when the Occupy movement came. It came to the City of London. It did a brilliant job of waking people up to the power of the city and the huge amount of secret or private lobbying that's going on, the billions that the banks are pumping into who knows what manipulation of the media. We won't know for decades. And I think we can win that battle because people are so angry about it, because the system is so shaky. But I don't think we'll win that battle if we try and spread it out to everything. And I do fear that the historical function of the Occupy movement, in 10 years' time, when we look back, we might say, you know what the Occupy movement did? It reunited the ruling class. The ruling class was horrifically split in 2008. Everybody was furious with the financial community. That's bankers, insurance companies, hedge funds on one side, and on the other side, the companies that actually make money. Yeah, they're rich, but they actually make things. They make money out of things. And of course, the landed gentry and the aristocracy on the other side. So there are all these very wealthy people who were very angry with the financial community. And I think when the Occupy movement first came along, there was a chance it could have